1. Never look at the gardener. Enter doors only after knocking. 3. The clocks need daily winding. 4. House staff and visitors must mask. 5. Every statue in the long hall must be completely covered. 6. Rule 3 repeats for the grandfather clock, set again before leaving. 7. Wrong deliveries occur daily. Only accept on the second attempt to the center of the hedge maze. Leave the maze within 5 minutes. 8. Depart Kilgore Court for any video calls. Video and photography are strictly prohibited. I'm halfway through my 3-week stint as a house sitter at Kilgore Court, an allegedly haunted estate where I'm required to follow strict rules. Words of each line are strung together, along with the secret word in the first letters, NTHRWRLD. When I spoke with my sister earlier this week about my new job, she laughed. Oh my gosh, isn't there a small part of you that wants to break a rule, just to see what would happen? No, you haven't changed a bit. My twin sister Elena is the opposite of me in every respect. She has friends, I have none. She worked through college and bought a house. I still live with our parents. I consider her brash, loud, and reckless. She considers me a socially impaired loser with a stick the size of difficulties with socialization and therefore employment. I am sure it was a surprise for her to hear I had acquired this job. My employer is endlessly complimentary. By this I meant Pim Perrin. I had not met Mr. Kilgore. My tasks are minimal, and my pay is 3 times hers. She actually do not lie. That's not true. You have lied, she said over the video call. I haven't lied since we were 8 years old. Pretty sure I caught you jerking off once, and you lied that you were reading the article. Jesus fucking Christ, L. My sister is the only person who has ever been able to wind me look like our parents' house. She was still giggling at having gotten me to swear. It was against the rules growing up, and I still rarely use profanity. I mean, it could be a background. Looks like you just plucked it off the internet. I brought the phone through the sitter's suite, lingering on the embroidered furniture. Holy fuck, that's your office? Swanky. Hey, can I come visit? No. I turned the camera back toward me. Oh, come on. The truth is, I did want to give her permission to visit. Many things around this place did not make sense, and I would have welcomed another pair of eyes and opinions than my own. Serving reason. I was sick of my twin sister regarding me as a failure, and it would have felt validating to show her that, whatever my deficits in charm, I could succeed in this position, where social interactions were unnecessary and my exacting nature was useful regarding the rules. I wanted her to realize that I was not the utter failure she said. Yes. But even after I made her swear to follow all the rules, I knew I was making a mistake. My twin sister is exactly the wrong sort of person to bring to Kilgore Court. Rule 2. Holy shit. Elena whirled, snapping pictures as we ascended the front steps to the grand double doors, tucking it into my back pocket despite her squawks. Rule 8. No video or photography. I'll give it back after the tour. Wait here. What? Why am I right? She chuckled as I put on my magpie mask and ducked inside. Rule 1. She sang the foyer cloakroom. Rule 4. I corrected, returning to hand her the mask. Why am I a parrot? Because you talk too much. We finished at the same time. Jinx, she added lightly, strapping on the mask. How do I look, Mr. Magpie? Looks were appliance with Rule 4. Elena blew a raspberry when I told her this, and instead of following me up to the sitter's quarters, she insisted on touring the mansion first. I had no choice but to follow, otherwise she'd have opened doors without knocking. Rule 2. Obviously she could not be allowed anywhere near the garden or the long hall, and I abbreviated the conservatory, the library, the lounge, the ballroom, and all the club board rooms, as she put it. When we neared the kitchen, the odor of the corpse blossoms, which was ever present throughout the drafty house, became eye-wateringly strong. Upon knocking and opening the kitchen door, the stench of rot made me gasp. Elena, clapping a hand to her nose. Bro, it smells like they left a whole pig to rot. What is that stink? I don't know. The sitter's quarters has its own kitchen, and there were no tasks to bring me regularly to this wing of the house. Garlic braids hung from the ceiling, and some bread sat going stare. After a cursory look through the cupboards turned up nothing, I turned to leave. I was on my way out when I heard her say 4 words that sent a chill up my spine. "Where does this lead?" I looked back. She had opened the cellar door. Only, she hadn't knocked. "The cellar," I said "I think the smell's coming from down there. Elle, don't." Breaking out of my trance, I lunged and caught her wrist so hard she yelped. "What the hell? Don't go down there." I stared past her. I had never been down to the cellar before, but Pim had showed it to me the first day. Brick wall, vegetables. This was not the same stairwell. For one thing, there was no light switch on the wall. And the walls were not brick, but dank and glistening stone, as were the stairs, descending into a square of blackness so thick it was impossible to make out anything down there except the stench. Yeah, I wasn't planning on going down there, Elena said, shoving past me. She playfully tried to shut the door on me, and my heart slammed into my ribs. I ran through her to get out. I shut the door behind us as Elena barked at me. "Oh, you jerk. Stop, Dick, you are so uptight. You promised to follow the rules." We bickered all the way back to the sitter's quarters, where she hurled off the parent mask with a squawk of frustration and collapsed onto the fainting couch. "I am not wearing that itchy thing again. God, stuff your stupid rules." This was as good a segue as I want to talk to you about them, actually. To consult you. Consult me? She perked up. On these rules and rumors of the mansion being haunted. As she leaned in, I pointed to the pictures framed on the walls, explaining how they had all been drawn by the previous caretaker, who also penned the sitter's rules. I ran my finger down the list, showing how it could read NTHERWRLD, and also if you strung together the first word of each line it read. Never enter the house. Every rule wrong. Only run. Leave. Depart. Elena looked vaguely impressed. Dude was committed to his creep. He claims he disfigured his own face as punishment for breaking a rule. He was diagnosed with dementia. He kept a journal, full of ravings, in which he expounded on his reasons for these specific rules. I showed her a paper I'd copied from his journal. 1. Never look at the gardener. The sight and enter doors only after knocking. Unlocked doors lead to the bone closet. 3. The clocks need daily winding. The chimes cast the veil. 4. House staff and visitors must mask. The skinless man stalks the unmasked. There is no escaping the skinless man. 5. Every statue in the long hall to swap places. 6. Rule 3 repeats for the grandfather clock. Set again before leaving. The clock sets time. 7. Wrong deliveries occur daily. The wrong deliveries are collectors. Only accept on the second attempt, not the first or third. The master awaits his meal. Run the package to the center in 5 minutes. Linger and the veil will lift from your eyes. 8. Depart Kilgore Court for any video calls. Video and photography are strictly prohibited. The camera does not lie. I tapped my fingers nervously while my sister read. I had already agonized over these rules to the point of question. Also wrote about orgies with demons, curses he cast over his enemies, corpses he dragged into the garden to rot, and how he carried a syringe with anesthetic with him at all times until the day he cut his own face off. Records from last century detailing his increasing hysteria indicated that I should take his sick mind in an age when medical care was rare. It was only tradition that the rules were handed down and still followed today, as was his name. Pim Parent, passed to every caretaker. Tradition, and likely marketing, given what the current Pim had told me about how staff play up the hauntings for credulous guests by fiddling with the all just superstition and stories. Except, I had dreamed about the rules, and his explanation for them. I'd seen things I couldn't explain, sister to provide some insight. To be the to all the electric or to tell me it was all real. Still, I was not prepared for her reaction. She burst into peals of laughter. "Don't tell me," she said, fighting for breath. "Don't tell me you believe this nonsense?" My face grew warm. Oh, Sam, little brother. My head against her like a small child. I shoved her back as she laughed. Sweetie, you take everything so damn literally. Did this pimp guy talk in a spooky voice when he told you about this stuff? Oh, Sam, the caretaker of this haunted house, must issue you away or nigh. She managed to snatch her phone, snapping pictures. She leaned in to show me. Look, it's all perfectly normal. The camera doesn't lie, huh? The rules don't apply in the sitter's quarters. Oh, so it's only out there that's haunted? She raised her eyebrows. Her challenge sent the hairs on the back of my neck prickling. So if I take a photo out there, I'll see ghosts? I don't. You don't know? You mean you haven't taken any? She stopped, eyes lighting up. You haven't? Oh my God, Sam, you are so precious. You didn't want to break the rules. Rule 8, Rule 8, poor Sam. It's okay. Your sis is here now. I can break some of those big bad rules for you. I didn't ask you here to break rules. Didn't I though? A small part of me wondered. I could feel my grasp on the situation slipping away, and I was begging her to put a loud ding-dong. Rule 7. Hell's bells, that's loud. Is that the doorbell? She asked. Ignore it. I sat down at my desk, anxiety tying my intestines into knots with each ringing peal, a clanging like church bells. My sister looked at the CCTV. Their livery uniform. She's got a package. I said ignore it. Why are you? She glanced at the rules, and her lips quirked. I frowned as she stood up. Chillax, Sam, I am. She smiled impishly as she darted to the door. I just want to see ELL. But she was on the stairs while I rushed to fasten on my mask. She yanked open the heavy front door just as I caught up, the parrot mask dangling uselessly from my fingers as the delivery woman handed her a machine for electronic signature. My sister offered the pen to me, and I shook my head, aghast. Elena signed. Elena shook the box as the delivery van pulled away. It's empty. Oh, that churning in the pit of my stomach. You gonna be pissed if I open it? She cocked her head. She had broken rules too, 4 and now 7. Everything was happening too fast. It was like when we would shatter all our parents' rules and warn me not to tattle. I always did. She always called me a snitch and a narc. But just like back then, I had to admit to a prickle of curiosity as she flouted authority. Perhaps my sister was right. Perhaps the first caretaker had simply been mad, and it was a tradition I'd been ordered to obey. But the box was empty. Inside the lid was written, "Leave for the face collector." I made a small, terrified sound in the back of my throat. Elena cackled, leaning in to snap a selfie of us. Smile, bro. She giggled, spinning alone, and when I didn't, she said, Oh, now I've gone and done it. I broke Sam. Bro? You okay, or was that one too many rules? Gotta admit though, that last one was creepy. That's going on Insta. She laughed and tapped her fingers across her phone's screen. Then I said, her exclamation snapping me out of my catatonia. Dude, it's gotta be a filter or something. In the photo, behind her beaming face and my feathered mask, the arch ceiling rose cracked and crumbling, the pillars streaked with grime. It was like one of those pictures of abandoned places you see viral. The hedge maze has hallucinogenic flora, I murmured.